Okay, let's jump right in. We're going to talk about something that's kind of like modern-day magic, how the stories we tell can take something totally worthless and turn it into an absolute treasure.
So take a look at this. If you had to put a price on it, what would you say? A buck? Maybe two? But what if I told you its real value has nothing to do with money at all? Yeah, because an object's true worth, the thing that makes it significant, often has absolutely zero to do with its price tag. It's all about the story.
And that brings me to a really fascinating guy, Paul Lucas, a man who has pretty much built his entire career on this very idea.
I love this description of him. Lucas has been called a minutia fetishist and an obsessive esotericist. And that's not a knock on him, it's his superpower. He has this incredible talent for diving super deep into things most of us would never even notice, and he finds these amazing stories hidden inside.
You can see it in all his work, right? From a column called Inconspicuous Consumption, where he looks at tiny design details we all ignore, to Keyring Chronicles, where he uncovers the stories behind the random stuff people carry on their keys. The theme is always the same. Our ordinary, everyday objects are like little anchors for our biggest memories and histories.
So all of this really culminates in one of his most powerful projects, a live storytelling event he created called Show and Tell. You can think of it like an open mic night, but instead of songs or poems, people bring up their stuff. And the whole premise was so simple, it was brilliant. Show and tell is exactly what you think it is. Anyone, literally anyone, could show up, bring an object, and get on stage to share its story.
The rules were dead simple. Bring something that means something to you and talk about it. But here's the kicker, and this is so important. You only had 3 minutes, max. That time limit forced everyone to cut right to the heart of their story, to pack all that memory and meaning into a really powerful little narrative.
And the kinds of things people brought in, wow, it was all over the map. Sure, you had some really weird, eccentric stuff, like a glass eye, or even an old electroshock machine. But then you also had the most mundane things imaginable. A candy bar, a worn-out pair of jeans, a magazine printed in Braille. It just goes to show, it's never about how rare the object is. It is always about the story attached to it.
So, show and tell proved that stories create deep emotional value. We get that. But what about actual, cold, hard cash? Well, another project decided to put that to the test.
This was the central question behind the Significant Objects Project, started by Rob Walker and Joshua Glenn. They asked, can you take a totally worthless object, attach a story to it, even a completely made-up fictional story, and add real, measurable, monetary value?
The experiment was genius. They went out to thrift stores and yard sales and bought 100 random, cheap, insignificant things. Then they got 100 talented writers to each take one of these objects and invent a compelling but totally fake story for it. Then they put the objects up for sale on eBay, with the fictional story as the item description. So, how much did all this junk cost them? Get this, $128.74 for all 100 items. I mean, we were talking an average of about $1.25 per object. Genuine junk. And after these objects were given their new, powerful stories, what did they sell for? $3,612.51. I mean, that is just a staggering difference.
I mean, just look at this chart. That tiny little bar on the left, that's the initial cost. And that giant one next to it, that's what they sold for. The project's creators called this a significance premium of over 2,700%. If that isn't hard proof that narrative creates tangible, monetary value, I honestly don't know what is.
Okay, so we've seen that it works. It's pretty undeniable. But the big question is why? What's the psychology behind all of this? Well, there's actually a pretty cool theory that explains it all.
And it all comes down to how we think about collections. A curator named John Willis Clark had this great way of breaking it down into two totally different types.
First, you've got what he called a working collection. So think about a scientist's lab with jars of specimens or a library full of books you can check out. The value here is in what the objects do or the information they hold, right? They're basically tools. You could swap one out for a similar one and it wouldn't really make a difference.
But then you have the unique collection. Now this is completely different. This is a museum. Here, every single object is one of a kind, precisely because of its specific history, its story. Each one is irreplaceable. You can't just swap out one historical artifact for another one.
And this is the light bulb moment. Storytelling is that magic ingredient.
It's the alchemy that transforms an object from the working category into the unique category. It takes a mass-produced, replaceable item and turns it into a singular, irreplaceable artifact.
So let's bring this all together. How does this apply to the stuff we all have lying around our own homes? Well, that's where this idea of a performative archive comes into play. It boils down to this concept called affective provenance. Now, it's a fancy term, but all it really means is the emotional history we have with an object, something totally separate from what it cost or where it was made. And projects like Show and Tell create a performative archive. They give a stage to our personal stories, validating the emotional weight we give our things, and making our personal collections feel just as legitimate as any museum's.
You know, this quote just nails the whole idea perfectly. Show and tell is less about the objects than the histories that accompany them. The object is just the prompt. It's the key that unlocks the door. The story? That's the real treasure inside.
Which brings us right back to you. I want you to just take a second and look around the room you're in. What's the most significant object you see? It's probably not the most expensive thing you own, but what's its story? Because that story, that's where its true, immeasurable value really is.